Welcome back to the EJ Ward Field View Training Series. In this video, we're going to go over how to add and change a Ward 4 CANceiver main configuration. So to start out, we need to drop down the CANceiver management folder. And inside of there, we have our CANceiver configs up here at the top. So basically, at its simplest level, what a CANceiver configuration is, what data it's going to grab from your vehicle when it's out and about and that vehicle's actually moving and the CANceiver is on. So we start out with a basic main configuration with GPS and a basic configuration, and those two are loaded into every system. But let's say we want to go ahead and make our own. We're going to go ahead and click on Add Record. And first, you're just going to see this small amount of information, and then once we save it, more information is going to become available to us, so we can change it. So the configuration name. Then you can have a description. The description is whatever you would like it to be, so I can put it as training config there. You can put in a version number if you want to, so we're just going to put 1.0 for the version number. And it just defaults to 1 there, so we can increment that version every time you change it if you want to, so you can have different versions or you know what version you're on. We have our active checkbox, so we want to make sure this is active if you want these CANceivers to be able to use this configuration. And then below that we have our card options. So this is something in our Ward 3 CANceivers was done through the JetScan, which is another piece of hardware that we create to actually put information into the CANceivers themselves. We can do this straight from Field View now with the Ward 4 CANceivers. And we have our PIN required. That's if you want them to use a separate PIN like an employee PIN. We have our ignore loss of signal. For those of you that watched the adding vehicle video, we went over loss of signal there because it's inside of there as well, but we can just do it on the straight on the CANceiver. You have your allow fueling with ignition on, and you can fuel using your hour meter instead of an odometer. I'm not going to have any of these checked on this one. I'm just going to go ahead and click on save. Once this saves successfully, we have another section here at the bottom. And this is where all of our event maps are going to be. And the event maps are just types of data that you want to grab. So we have a blank slate right now. From here, we're going to go ahead and click on Add Event Map. And now it's going to give us an event map to have. And we can have quite a few event maps inside of one configuration. So the PID type, which PID is a process ID. So this is the information that's coming from the vehicle. Now, not all vehicles are going to have this on their network, so you might have an older vehicle that might not have the absolute throttle position or your absolute evaporator system vapor pressure. But there's a lot of information inside of here, and you can go into the Field View manual, and it will have all of these laid out and what they are. So I'm just going to do some simple ones here, and we're going to grab an odometer. And the easiest way to find them instead of going up and down and searching for them is just to start typing them in. So I have my odometer, or have an odometer that was at when I got a DTC. So if you got a diagnostic trouble code, it's going to give you the odometer at that time that you had that DTC. We just want a regular odometer. So the polling frequency here is basically how often is it going to grab that odometer. So we have this one in seconds. It's going to grab it every 15. And then your measurement type is when is it going to save it to the CANceiver. So it's checking your odometer every 15 seconds, but it's only going to save it when the ignition comes on. I can also set when the ignition is off. I could do an interval current. So the interval current is you have your logging interval. So that's logging is when it's saving it. So I can have every 75 seconds, it's going to grab that odometer and save it. And then once that vehicle connects to the server, so it's typically when it gets Wi-Fi signal, or if you have the active, it's going to grab it all the time. Or if you have it hooked to, let's say you have a vehicle that has Wi-Fi in it, and you have your CANceiver connected to that Wi-Fi and it connects to your system constantly, then it's going to be every 75 seconds, it's going to be sending this odometer into it. I want mine whenever the ignition comes off, and I also want to do it when it comes on. So I'm going to do this one as ignition on. If you have a GPS antenna installed, you can include the GPS coordinates. And the GPS extended just gives a little bit more information. It gives elevation, and it also gives how many satellites it had connected to it at once at the time it was grabbing this. The other thing that you can do is a drive cycle. So a drive cycle is an ignition on, and the ignition off is a full drive cycle. So we don't want it as a drive cycle because I'm going to add another one with the ignition off, because a drive cycle would only give us one odometer, and I want two of them. I want when the vehicle turns on and when it turns off. So we're going to go ahead and click on Save. And once that's saved successfully, we can just keep adding event maps. And you can add a bunch of event maps, and we're going to go ahead and do that now before we even save. So I'm going to add an event map. It's going to keep adding them up above them, so you're going to see your events just grow bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're going to go ahead and do an odometer again. And here we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be ignition off. And as you can see here, we don't have ignition on because we already have it selected. So you aren't going to be able to select ignition on multiple times for at least an odometer record. We're going to go ahead and include the GPS and the GPS extended. We're going to add another event map. And let's say this time we want speed. So we have our vehicle speed or the turbo speed. So we're going to go ahead and do vehicle speed. This one's going to be a little bit different because I want to know if this vehicle is going over a certain speed. And the way I'm going to do that is go down to the measurement type. And now we have threshold high and threshold low. So I'm going to hit threshold high. And it's going to be in, this one's set up for kilometers per hour, but it will be set up in miles per hour depending on how you have your system set up. So I'm going to go ahead and do 75 on this one. And the polling frequency is going to be every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, it's seeing if you're going over. And then once you go above that threshold, it's going to start marking it. And it's going to start saving it at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and include a GPS and my GPS extended so I can see exactly when this vehicle was when it went over the 75. And we're going to add another event map. For this one, I want the seatbelt for the driver. So we have a driver's seatbelt here. And the driver's seatbelt is going to give us basically a percentage. And I want to do this over a drive cycle because I want to see the percentage that that driver had his seatbelt on during the entire drive cycle, when that person turned the ignition on and then turned the ignition back off. So I'm going to go ahead and select drive cycle. As you can see, if I uncheck, it's going to give me a logging interval, so it'll log it every 300 seconds. But since I'm doing drive cycle, it's just going to log it once at the end of the drive cycle. And it's just going to pull it every 60 seconds. And then we're going to keep it at interval current. And then we're going to give a GPS location for both of them. So it's going to give me a GPS location at the very end of the drive cycle, so where they parked at. And that's pretty much good for me. You can add as many as you want. There are plenty of PIDs to just look at. You can play around with them. I can do DTCs if I want to see if there's DTCs there. There's quite a few things here that you can choose from and check out. And you can look at the manual to see what each one is and what it does. The big thing to know is if your vehicle does not support it. So if I have a vehicle that's older and doesn't support the driver's seatbelt, my CANceiver is going to ask for it, but it's just not going to get that information. It's going to come in blank. Now, it doesn't mean that that vehicle is going to get messed up in any way or the CANceiver is going to get messed up anyway. It will be fine. It's just, it's not going to get that information for you. So if you have this CANceiver configuration and it's put into multiple vehicles and one of them doesn't have it, all the other ones will get it. It's just not that one. So once we have everything done, we're going to go ahead and click on Save. And once that's saved successfully, I have my CANceiver configuration already ready to go. So if I ever want to change it, I just need to go back into that configuration. So I can go back into my training one here, and you can keep adding more events, or you can change the event maps up. So let's say I don't want the ignition on, I just want the ignition off. I can go ahead and click on the delete, and it's going to delete that event map from there. And if I wanted to add that event map in, I could just click on the add event map and add that back in there. And then I can go ahead and save it. And I've changed my configuration. Now, you can take the version number up if you want to. It's just for logging purposes, really. So I'm going to go ahead and change the version number to 2 on this guy and save it. So now I have version number 2 of my training 1 configuration. This concludes the video on how to add and change your Ward 4 CANceiver main configurations. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.